All right, thank you for joining us. Welcome to our presentation, When Subscriptions Shift, Joining the Dots Between Reading Lists, Usage and the Real World Cost of Journal Cancellations. My name is Wendy Campbell. I'm the Collection Performance Librarian at Deakin. My job is to look after all the data and analytics around the library's print and physical collections. I look after usage data, the library budget data, and anything to do with our cost, value, location, size, scope of the library's collections. So that's me. I'll pass over to Bex to introduce herself.
I'm Bex. I'm the coordinator of course resources and access. So I deal with all things reading list, and my team deals with all things reading list and accessible formats, and also textbooks. So lots of fun there. All things curriculum. So just a little bit of setting the scene, what this is all about. We're going to be talking specifically about the case of Elsevier and the fun that we had last year. So as we all know, during 2025, Call started negotiations with a number of high-profile publishers in order to get some decent deals done for read and publish agreements. They stalled with Elsevier in November, and we all had that oh gosh moment of figuring out what to do. What will that look like if we actually don't get a subscription across the line with Call and also individually. We wanted to make it evidence-based, so we really needed to look at what we had access to, where we could get other stuff from, what did that mean at Deakin for our teaching, learning and publishing. And I can't remember when I hand over to you, so you just jump on in. Cool. So yeah, this was Elsevier. This was a big platform that was used a lot. It provided access to a vast collection across many different sort of specialties, not just health. It impacted across the board, but we needed to see where that was. It is a significant value contract, so we also wanted to think about how we might play with that a little bit as well and provide that information up to management to make the best informed decision about where we could go if there was no Call agreement to get behind. Cancellation would impact course materials. We knew that, and we just had to strategize how we were going to find that, how we were going to contact, who we were going to contact, what was going to be the message. And as part of that, at Deakin, we created a little working group for cancellation actions group, which changed into contingency planning. And it was bringing in critical people from not just the collection space, but the client experience, from research, from all areas that this would touch, just to make sure that we weren't missing anything, that everyone had buy-in, that everyone could have input into where it was going to go. And yeah, as obviously, we needed to understand the risks and the crucial mitigation processes to help inform the strategies that we were going to go forward. That's you. Good.
So a number of key questions came at us, and these questions came thick and fast, changing regularly every day and week as it all sort of just went along like a freight train. But we were able to condense it in the end. It wasn't as neat as this, but in the end, we had these main questions. So what was the impact? What was the impact on the teaching, learning and research at Deakin? So how big a sky is falling question were we really looking at? In specifically, what was the content loss? So what would we lose in terms of what journals, what titles and what years would just disappear overnight if we cancelled? We did some work on cost estimation. So what, if we were prepared to spend some money, although not the price of the subscription that's been cancelled, what would it cost to minimise that impact? So how could we buy just some journals and minimise the impact? So a bit of cost modelling there. And then along the way, of course, what what were the alternative access options? How could we continue to provide access via other avenues, which might have been open access, similar content on another platform, through products such as Article Galaxy Scholar. So what could we do, but worst case scenario, if the cancellation went ahead? So those are the questions we were looking to answer. Next slide. So basically this was a data analysis project. So Bex and I work with data every day. That is for me, that's my bread and butter of what I do. So we identified 5 sources of data and we used Tableau to do our data analysis following some data manipulation in basic Excel. The journal holdings data obviously was a no-brainer. We had to get our catalogue data to see what we actually had in terms of titles and coverage. The post-termination access data, or PTA, as it's known, for those who don't know, the PTA, it kind of mirrors what an old-fashioned print serials scenario where you subscribe for a certain number of years, you cancel your sub, but those journals are still on the shelf. You've still got them forever. PTA is the same thing in an electronic version. So you retain content you have had a subscription to, but only if that's in your license to do so, which is not everything in Elsevier. So that was a really big challenge to get that data. All the libraries were rushing around trying to do the same thing, all wanting the same data, which was coming from either, if they had the data themselves internally, that was great. Otherwise, it was getting it from Elsevier without wanting to let them know why we wanted it, or call. So that was a really big thing. Counter usage reports, which is the data I deal with every day, is the usage reporting for our Elsevier content. The reading list data, which Bex manages, which was all the reading list information, the click data, so showing what was actively being used from our Elsevier content in reading lists, so that where was the curriculum impact. And then the subscription cost data. This was just a publicly available price list we got from the Elsevier website, which told us how much it would cost to subscribe to individual journals if we went down that road. So we gathered all those 5 data sets and we basically did some manipulation and threw them at Tableau. Next one. So the technical challenges were vast before we even began. The big problem was normalizing the data structure. So my biggest challenge was looking at that holdings data compared to the PTA spreadsheet. It's just about spreadsheets being formatted differently, but my goodness, it was a nightmare. So for anyone who's looked at a holdings list from a knowledge base, you get a title and then a cell that says 1995 to 2000, just in one cell. The equivalent on the PTA list was 5 rows for every single year. It's like a row for a year. So it just wasn't talking to each other. We did a lot of AI to assist in data expansion. So just writing crazy long formulas that broke my laptop for 24 hours that tried to normalize that data and say, my data over here looks like this, my data over here looks like this, put it all together so it's the same, so I can then do some analysis. So we learned a lot about how AI could assist in that, and building formulas, which then required a lot of validation, but to get that data suitable to go into a visualization tool like Tableau was really important. The data quality thing, obviously anyone who deals with journals knows what this is all about. Inconsistent titles, capitalization, ampersands versus and, missing pub years, incomplete ISSNs, print ISSNs, EISSNs, a whole lot of stuff we had to look at and try and clean before we put it in. Bex has some more char of this bit, I believe.
Yeah. So it's not just in data that we get from other sources or from the catalogue. In terms of reading list stuff, we all know that it bookmarks differently. Sometimes it brings in the ampersand, sometimes it brings in the, sometimes it doesn't bring in the. Depending on where it comes from, it might not always have an ISSN at all. And that's always fun when you want the match point to be ISSN. We played around with a few other match points and then in the end realised that there aren't that many records that are impacted that don't have an ISSN, so let's just chuck them in and future-proof, and then that's a project moving forward as well. And there was a lot of manual corrections, but a lot of automated corrections that we could do as well. So in reading list data, the ISSN can sometimes be all together without the hyphen, and yet traditionally it's got a hyphen between 4. So we were able to use AI to rig up a little formula so that we could standardize all of that. find and replace, so that it has all -4. So yeah, it's not just publisher data, it's not just library data, it is out there on the web. It just depends on what can be pulled through. So analysis and insights. We are big on not just having data, but also providing insights on what that data is. So telling the story, not just providing the data.
The tableau.
Can do.
We've got a couple of slides here, which we're not going to go over because this is for the purpose of the slide deck later on. If we're not here, won't necessarily have much view of this. So those next two slides just kind of summarize a few points. We just want to show you the cool stuff we did in Tableau. Yes, so this is this might look familiar to people who were involved in the call activities of last year. I'm proud to say I built this first, and then they used it, which was lovely. I was happy for them to take it on board. They replicated the same thing to share with other libraries, but it was fun. What I basically did was a really complicated, again, AI-assisted formula in my holdings and PTA spreadsheet that asked the question, would we retain access to this piece of content, lose it, or did we have it in clinical care? Because we still had that subscription going. So everything was sort of boiled down to three dots. You had a pink dot if we were going to have it in the, sorry, this was our 2025 coverage. So this is what we had now at that time. So do we have it as subscription? If it was a pink dot, yes. Do we have it, would we have it in the future through post-termination access? That was the green dot. If we still had it in clinical care, it was the grey dot. So you can see at a glance how big the problem is going to be. So we can see there's a lot of pink dots there that we knew were going to disappear. We would only be left with the green and the grey. So this visualisation goes forever, all the way down and all the way across to the 1800s in terms of the fact file access from wherever we go. As you can see, as you go further back, there's some post-termination access rights, but not all that much. It was available to be searched by journal. So what we started doing was produce this sort of stuff so that the members of our cancellation action team, which included members of our client experience team, and Bex and her team could see at a glance, let's just look up this one journal and see how far access would go back. So they didn't have to be in the raw data of the holdings spreadsheets. So this was sort of the basic first version. The next one across was a consolidation in just boiling it all down to what is the impact when you smush it all together. So in terms of the year and the title, all those dots, that's how many green dots there were compared to purple dots. So when you look at it like that, it wasn't as big a skies falling situation as was thought, because the percentage of lost access was only 15%. But that's just in terms of a year and a journal being kind of counted as a one. It doesn't take into account how much that journal gets used, but we can say. We then looked at narrowing it down to specific years. So again, similar to the dot thing, but you can actually look at it by year and content. So this would be really useful. Say Bex is in her team. She knows that an article on reading lists is from the 2014 year of academic radiology. So you go into here and just really quickly narrow that down. So that was just another version of viewing the same data. We very much a focus on finding the information quickly and being able to talk to people even within the library that didn't really understand perhaps this whole PTA thing. This would help them answer that question really quickly. Will I have access to this? Then we started to look at the impact in terms of usage. Now, this has been anonymised so that the actual raw usage data is not seen. So the pinky purple column in the original data is numbers. So in the hundreds or thousands of article requests, we've changed this to percentage. So that's all private. But what we can see is how bad is the problem and which journals has the most usage. So therefore, obviously the impact would be greater. So our most used journal is the Journal of Cleaner Production. And that had 2.73% of all usage on the Elsevier platform, which sounds like a very small number, but when you look in the actual numbers, it's quite a function. That would be the worst one. So it was just, again, another way of looking at impact specifically to the journals and searchable, because previously we were just looking at loss. Now we're looking at volume of loss. Like, how much do we actually care about this journal? That's what we're looking at here. Then we joined. What we looked at here was one of those questions that came up along the way, which was, tell us what years are the most impacted. I have hidden the axis down the left so you can actually see the numbers, but what this is article requests by year of publication. So we can see that the big bars are in the last 10 years. Obviously, that's where the content is being used. The green, we would still have that content. So what we're saying here is everybody, if everyone went and used the same articles this year as they did last year, we'd be all okay for that green, but all those pink ones would not be okay. So we were able to see that the biggest impact on would be the last 10 years and a smaller impact later on. This led us to start thinking about, okay, if we're going to go down the road of subscriptions, we really need to get some 10-year access going. We can probably do without the older years, but the 10 years is where the real pain will be. And then finally, we bring in the reading list data. So this was like the culmination of all 5 data sets, all in one dashboard, which was called Wendy and Bex's Magic, because that was so much work getting that together. So what we're looking at there is the usage, which is the one that's just got percentages. So again, it's the Journal of Cleaner Production at the top, but then also the reading list usage on the far right. So we've got usage on the platform, but then usage on reading list. So looking at the content that is specifically being requested by our academics for our users to look at, where is that getting the usage? Then the dollars in the middle is that publicly available price list. How much would it cost us to pick up the Journal of Cleaner Production? $10,000. We built this to the scenario building. So the filters at the top give us some ranges of, you just sort of classify things into very high, moderate, low. So if we can just filter that Bex and get, so say we want to go, okay, just let's capture the very high and high use journals only. We're going to sacrifice the moderate to and lows, but we also want to scoop in the very high and the high reading lists, because we know that's important. And then it recalculates and you go, oh, look at that. We could spend $32,000 to get them all. That's pretty cool. If we wanted to spend more than $32,000, so what I'm doing is looking at the top of the dollar field has added up there. We could then do that in other things and go, right, well, maybe we've got more money. Let's pick up the moderates as well and, you know, see what that might look like. And then we can see that that's actually going to cost us $165,000. The reason we've got the usage and the reading lists together is that if we needed to, we could make a philosophical decision based on what usage we might think is most important. Is it the usage on the platform or is it the reading list usage? So we had both there. If we look at everything, it was going to cost millions to pick up everything. So we obviously would never do that because that's the purpose of having the big subscription. But look at that, $9.6 million. If we didn't have a subscription, we still want to improve it. The last one, we probably might skip that. It's just the same thing, but drilling down to per year, but it's the same data shown a different way. So that's our Tableau work. This data was presented to members of our cancellation action team to inform them, to answer the questions that kept coming up and to look at the impact. And then it also helped Bex in the proactive work that her and her team started doing at this time. So that's a nice segue for me to pass to Bex.
So you've seen her dashboards, now look at mine. So for reading lists, we really wanted to see, give it a second to load. We really wanted to see, again, based on the journal title, what specific articles are being used and their metadata, and we can filter it by the address. So the first thing that we did, we've all got no reason to do this. The first thing we did is export that and then chuck it through Paywall's little cool application.
and it spat out a CSV file that told us potential open access points. So we would have been able to go through and update some to actually access this via a university repository, or there's an open access version on the publisher's website over here or wherever. So after doing that, we then looked to see which journals we have available in other subscriptions, so Clinical P or on JSTOR, and updating those just so that we can refine it really quite detailed down to what is actually going to be impacted, what will we not going to be able to access from reading lists via one of our subscriptions.
Sorry, how to drive it.
That's all right. And it's just some nice whole numbers at the top. We were able to identify unique articles. So 209 unique articles were going to be impacted by this, and 114 journals. Then we looked at the same data, but just at the top level, at the high level journal and year. So trying to replicate what Wendy did so that we could have a side-by-side comparison of that. And then we took a look at it from the view of units impacted and started reaching out to academics with the heads up of we're potentially going to be losing access, and read and publish agreements, as you might know, link to Paul's little announcement. Do you still require these? We're able to use the usage data and say, look, you don't have any reports on this, it hasn't had clicks. Can we just remove it and therefore it's not impacted? Or do you still want to use it, in which case, how about we add some context onto the reading list about why you want to read it? Or are you happy to investigate alternative open access resources and explore the services libraries? So there was lots of benefits for doing this activity because we were able to start those conversations and get them, again, thinking about finding alternatives. And then removing them and then being able to reassess the impact. And then just because we have faculties and people like looking at stats for faculties, we have this just to see which faculty was going to be most impacted or not impacted at all by this. And as you can see, as we said before, there's a vast array of different types of resource, different types of topics available on Science Direct, which would be impacted by this. So yeah, lots of fun stats, lots of fun stories that we were able to weave together into a complete story with reading list data and platform data. Back to our slides. So yeah, there's just some summaries on the slides for the slide deck that we'll provide to Isabel to have in the package. Cool. So outcomes and lessons learned. So we did get a successful negotiation in December. They came back together and we reached an in-principle read and publish agreement, which was great. But it didn't mean that this effort that we put together to do all of this was lost effort, that it was a waste of time, because we developed those new workflows. We developed those contingency action groups for future negotiation, conversation and pauses. We developed procedures and workflows to collect the data, wrote procedures for what we need to clean, where are the known issues, and we can constantly update those based on more issues that we find, because there's always going to be data. And yeah, we've established this reusable analytic model that we can do other publisher negotiations with. Right. And we actually built our confidence and capability in doing this because we knew our data. We know what our stuff has and what the limitations are. And so, yeah, we'd be able to happily replicate this. I'd say happily, I'd be happy to. And as an outcome of this, it did push us to think about other ways of working. So we started working with Article Galaxy Scholar. And as I said, we've got this contingency action planning group, which still lives on and can be reconvened for other negotiations or other contingency planning that we need to do.
So the lessons learned, cleaning the data, we kind of covered that earlier, but absolutely we always do that first. Acknowledging responsibilities that we're not wholly responsible for everything. You know, sometimes good enough is good enough, particularly when you're working with data that's come from all the different places that we've talked about. You can't take responsibility for everything and you can't hold up the process because we've still got a little bit of dodgy data in there. You just have to move on. So that was a bit of as a couple of people who are pretty proud of their work and attention to detail, it was hard. Sometimes you have to challenge yourself and go, no, just move on. There was an iterative process.
That's right.
We learned we had to just do over and over and over again. The dashboards that you're seeing, the outcomes are probably 5 different versions before each one got published. Each time we iterated, we learned something, more questions were asked, we refined, we repeated, we kept on building. We did this. This probably was done and dusted in about 6 weeks, but we got so many versions done in that short amount of time that we just kept pumping out more stuff, which was very satisfying. We learned that we needed to improve our own record keeping. So particularly with the post-termination access rights, we were completely dependent on the publisher or calls information on that. And although we do have that sort of data in our licensing information, it's not clearly identifiable at a party level in our catalogue. So we know we need to get better on that. We did data explanations. We have a very strict template of how we do this Tableau stuff at Deakin, and we went outside of the rules to provide some extra notes on clarity about what it all meant. It's all very small. You probably couldn't see it in detail, but it was important for us to communicate to a team of people that work, whilst they were in the library, they really don't work in this space day to day, and they really wouldn't understand what we meant by a reading list clip or a counter report or a PTA. And we had to get people like up to speed straight away. So we learned that our notes were really important. And we also learned what we already did know, but it was just gratifying to have reinforced that we have a really good understanding of our data already. And we know that for the future, that is really important. So,
yay, us.
It was good, yeah. Yes.
In our initial planning, this was, we know our stuff. Yay.
That was the history.
Yeah.
Oh,
and then
I
that's
probably
the end.
took some of yours.
I don't care. That's fine.
Yeah, I think we've probably got to time anyway.
I think we've run a smidge over. Sorry, the coffee and tea is here. But Wendy and I, there's our email addresses. We are here. We can have a talk now, or if you're desperate for a coffee and cakes, that's also an option. Over. Yeah. Does anyone have any questions?
I'm wondering if you would have to use all that work down on the scale publication. Yeah, no, not at this stage, but it is ready to use it. We have a list of publicans ready to go.
That's one question. I was just want to say that's amazing. I also feel slightly better about the show because it sounds like even Deakin's was a little unclear. So frustration. And my question to me about data cleaning, because I imagine that's going to be the hardest step for you to get the lead out and it integrates, then you can just use as just kind of a BAU thing, so read when Raymond's got a question, or whether it really has to be created by creating a business. That's like a big separate job. Does that make sense? Like you have to say, oh, we actually have to be a special occasion because it takes so long, or can you just say we've got a process and it's different?
So we'll go for reading the stuff, we have got on a backlog of stuff to do to make sure that ISSNs are in records ready, but there's a huge backlog and it's one of those nice little things.
I think the only data set we could do any work on internally is the holdings and the post-termination access. We're in the middle of doing a migration of our serials knowledge base from A to B. So that is its own challenge at the moment. I think once that's done, there probably will be an effort to go in and really look at our PTA stuff and it's a bit tricky for anyone's ever done tracking a knowledge base. Select the product is what the product is. It doesn't have PTA baked into the knowledge base entry. We have to sort of create something. So yeah, I guess we could create something that will turn into BAU, but to be honest, we have stuff. Questions? Thank you very much for your attention.